know free porn is messing up our sex lives because I think it's more messing up businesses. So people that make porn, there's a lot of money, there's a lot of time that gets invested into it. Getting actors and actresses in, you need to invest in equipment, editing, marketing and things like that. And then for someone to buy one of your clips and then rip it off the internet and then put it onto a free site, you don't have any control over that. So you've invested all that money and someone just goes and watches it for free. I mean, if you're...
I don't really care about how the porn industry is going. I'm quite happy if it would decline to some degree. I did go to an all-boys boarding school, so porn as a concept was probably my second parent. You know? it taught me things I didn't want to know. I think it is, to some degree, causing a lot of problems with the sex lives of young people.
Do you watch porn?
Not anymore, no.
Do you watch free porn when you did?
I did, yeah. I did watch free porn.
Okay, so do you think that influenced you in any way?
I think it did, yeah. I think I had poor expectations of what a healthy and happy sex life should be like. And I know of friends, and it's always classic, I know a friend, but I know of people who... It's always a friend. People who've complained about their boyfriends being like, acting as if they're on a porn set. Like, you're there with your partner, who you should, trust, respect, and have that, natural, affectionate bond, and you're treating it like it's a film set. It's just embarrassing, and it's more popular than we realise.
That maybe there needs to be more education around porn and how it is fake and it's staged and it is actors and actresses? Like when you watch, for example, I'm going to show my age here, but if you watch the movie Highlander and the guy's head comes off, everyone knows the guy's head doesn't really come off. Like it's a special effect. Yeah. But it's the same in porn. Like, women don't orgasm after 5 seconds of penetration.
It's
with
amazing
no other
how many men think that we do,
though. And like not all vaginas look like that. There's a lot of makeup involved.
But you're noting here some of the problems that are real, and that guys will shame women if they don't look like porn stars or act like porn stars.
Are we restricting this to porn alone, though? Should men be able to make the distinction between what is acted, what is for entertainment, and then socially realising that actually this isn't real life? You're much more successful in your sex life if you just listen to your partner, for example. Yeah. Is it an expectation that maybe we have specifically on the male side, I would argue, that when we see these, we think that it all looks very good for men, it all looks very excellent for us, and we expect that same in our relationships, because it's a social thing. It's not just about the porn that we watch, it's about how we're conditioned to expect our own treatment in sex and gender relationships.
But then, would you watch a rom-com and expect your love life to be exactly like that?
But people do also fall for that too.
Porn is different though, because your head switches off when you're watching porn. You're not going, oh, I might critically analyse the behaviour here of this gentleman. Unless you really enjoy that smacking, you're not thinking it. You're not thinking as you might be if you're watching.
I thought that would be inherent, but I guess people don't get it. But there's also the thing where some people do come from like more conservative backgrounds, so they don't have access to what sex is and how it works. So sometimes it does come in handy, because if you're curious and you want to know how it works, other than the biology, it is there. It might not be the best thing to watch, but it could be a guide of some sort. Yeah, but it does give high expectations for it. And I do believe that it could possibly desensitise men and make it harder for them to come, because if they keep watching it, I know my mum's going to watch this.
Stimulation on that area. Though,
if they get used to it, because again, I have a friend whose boyfriend could easily come to porn, but when they were together, it wasn't happening as much, because he had sort of like
desensitized to the material that they're watching as well, and the things that they then want to try. It becomes less sort of impactful, right?
But I think in a positive way, having access to some porn is a good way, especially for people with fetishes that feel that they are a freak, a weirdo, they're alone, they're the only person that enjoys this.
They can feel less alien about it.
They can then watch that and go, okay, well, I'm not that bad, and if it's a good conversation. It can be used as a good conversation opener between couples. Like,
I was going to say, not in general.
no, it's not like first date from Tinder. Like, let's talk about porn. But it can be a good conversation opener and a way to explore different things. So, for example, like I teach in universities about kink, and I teach people how to plan their own scenes at home. So, for example, if you've ever pinned someone's arms or put their legs up during sex and they've enjoyed it and you've enjoyed it, then that's called bondage. And then if you were to do a porn search for bondage, you could find a whole bunch of different creative ways to make that even better. So using cuffs or using different bits of equipment, you can even build things out of scaffolding, which looks innocuous.
It sounds like a lot of hard work.
You can learn how to do rope stuff
God,
and
fucking build
really
scaffolding now.
I know it's just a little thing, but you can then spend a good couple, make that last a couple hours instead of, and make it a really intimate experience through just doing a quick Google search and finding, oh, well, that's what they're doing, that looks really interesting, would you like to try that?
This is all well and good, but does it counteract the kind of massive damage that porn clearly has with like young men, the rate of young men having erectile dysfunction?
At what point do you give them agency over that?
Yeah.
At what point is it they should know the distinction?
We babysit men a lot, and we hold their hand and we excuse a lot of their behaviour.
You can't fucking get up because you watch too much
Exactly.
porn. You have to start addressing it, I think, as something that they do have some agency into. It's kind of addictive in a lot of ways. Like, there's a huge surge in porn addiction these days as well. And
but it's not just men that watches porn.
Of course,
though.
of course.
I watch porn, I enjoy
as a
it.
group average, it's definitely more men.
But I can remember being like, I was 18, 19, and I was dead against porn, like very much prudish. And I woke up one day and I was like, I want to pee in my boyfriend. Like, it just came to me and I'm like, this sounds like a fun thing to do. So, and we were very open and we could talk about
different
things.
versions of fun, but
yeah. And I said to him, I was like, I really want to pee on you. And he's like, okay, let's try it.
This is before watching porn.
Why do I find this so romantic?
Yeah.
I'm very confused.
He watched porn. I hated the fact that he watched porn and that he had magazines and things. I thought it was disgusting. If I ever found one, I'd be like, right in the bin with it. But because he watched that, he was very open-minded to me, being able to say to him, I want to pee on you. Now, if I'd said that to someone else who wasn't as open-minded, they could have then shamed me for that, and I would live with that. Yeah. You know, I would
carry that with you.
Yeah, internalise that, and then that then causes anxiety and all of these kind of things.
Sure.
So
communication is key.
Yeah. So him watching free porn made that conversation possible. I mean, and look at me now.
As someone who's grown up just naturally being the butt of people's jokes because I'm not white, it really affects you. And also, if your comedy is homophobic or racist and things like that, it's lazy because you haven't come up with an actual joke. And if it's not your lived experience, you don't even know what you're talking about. So when I often make jokes, they're based in South Asian culture or Scottish culture or British culture because I have lived those experiences and I know how they work, and I can tell you the jokes from the inside and you can laugh with me, you're not laughing at me. There's a difference.
So like the intention behind it
exactly.
It's a good intention.
But does that mean that because I'm an Englishman I can't tell jokes about an Englishman, an Irishman and a Scotsman walking to a bar because I haven't had the lived experience of being Irish or I haven't got Scottish blood in me?
That's not the same thing.
Why is it not? It's a joke that I don't understand.
You don't understand the joke.
I don't have the identity about it.
You're coming at it from an Englishman point of view though.
Sure,
so
but I'm
have
joking about Irish
experience.
culture. I'm joking about Scottish culture. Am I not allowed to do that because I don't have that subjective opinion or experience of?
It's just really facetious, to be fair. Like that's very.
Are you doing it to be cruel or are you doing it to be?
Do you really believe
be funny?
that?
But does it matter?
It's not the same thing as a butt of a joke being like, she's like a Paki, so she must be joining ISIS. Ha 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 ha! So funny. That's not funny.
Yeah, that's
incredibly
Scottish
lazy.
people being sort of tight with money is a different.
But you started your intro by saying comedy is very subjective, and now you're telling us what is and isn't funny. It seems like there's a bit of a disconnect there.
So which part of when people tell me to fuck off back home as a joke at the end of their jokes, and they're trying to do it in a comedy fashion, which part of that's funny?
Possibly to them.
But why is that funny?
I don't know. I'm not
it's
them.
It's a power thing, right? They want to put me in my place.
I'm not that person. I can't say I've ever told one
but
of those jokes.
If you take it out of the joke in context, is it still funny?
I don't know.
Or is it?
I don't know. To the person who
Is
laughs
that
at
kind
it,
of,
perhaps.
is it being used to then mask something that is malicious? Genuine,
it-
but because you put a
Yeah,
little
'cause,
chuckle on the end
the
of it.
context and the intention need to be right, and if they're not right, then it's not a joke. It's cruel.
It
I
is
think,
cruel.
I think we're
And
using
the
quite
thing
extreme
is-
examples though, because
But
sure,
we're not, because this is
I know,
actually
I know.
my entire
but
life.
I'm sure, but where we have kind of what comedy is and isn't acceptable, it's rarely stuck in this extreme realm of fuck off only because of who you are. It's more
It
kind of like
actually is because
but it's broader than that, isn't it? There are comedy
So
there are comedy
minorities
writers
at the
and
moment
stand-up-
are now being
Okay,
let
never mind.
into the
Never mind.
industry. We're being allowed into the industry. We have a little bit more power now. We're allowed to push back on these things. It's wonderful. Still more to do. But if we go 10 years ago, 9/11 jokes were like, right, I would be sitting and someone would be like, oh, are you Osama bin Laden's cousin? And that just others me, and also it makes me I feel humiliated. And I don't understand why that kind of humour is celebrated, because it is just a power thing. It's a way for them to remind me that they don't see me as British and maybe not even human. And I just don't see why it's funny. I can understand that people are like, oh, PC culture goes too far. Sometimes it does. But if you have never been part of a minority of any kind, you can't possibly understand how it shapes your life.
Sure.
And if you are a person of power,
I'm not doing any of these things. I'm trying to get back to the original question: is are there
responsibility.
things that we can't joke about? I mean, I
well,
would
if they're
never
racist,
want to. Well,
then yeah.
well,
Depends who's telling the joke.
I think that's so important. A Jewish person should be the one to tell the Jewish jokes, and it's funnier because they're coming at it with so much more nuance.
it sounds so manufactured, this idea that different identities are allowed to have their different areas of comedy. It sounds very conservative, actually. Only Jews can joke about Jewish culture. Only white people from England can joke about white. It's
That's
like,
because
come
white people
on,
have been used to joking about everything.
Well, why
You
don't
guys
you join
haven't
the party?
had
It's great fun. I
boundaries.
mean, just
because
expand.
I don't want to actually.
That suit yourself, but other people might want to enjoy themselves. And this kind of pathetic kind of
It's not
comedy
because
archaeology
we
looking
will
for
not be the butt of
offence.
jokes anymore. We will not be your fodder. We are human beings. We are here. We have been through so much more shit just to get into these doors and just like live in general.
Sure.
For someone to like base their comedy set on demeaning me.
For me, watching that is just jarring. I'm
It
like,
is.
no.
And also shock jocks.
not.
It's because you're not really good at what you
treat jokes
do.
as something that I am telling or I am enjoying. You have subjects within jokes. You can't treat it. You can't exclude those. You can't dehumanise the subjects of jokes as well. Which means you can't remove them from the context of that conversation about power, about whether that's about race or religion or whatever it might be. You can't remove the people that are involved in the joke from the conversation and from the conversations around those relationships.
Obsessing over identity and religion and background, it stifles creativity. I know yours.
Doesn't
Well,
stifle it.
it
It's
might.
not
It might
creative
for some,
to me.
but
I think
it might not be. You might not enjoy it.
fosters
But
it.
it
It fosters
doesn't change what I'm saying.
creativity.
It does. It
Because
pushes
you need
people
to get more creative in order
Exactly.
to build jokes which are actually funny rather than ones that are just lazy, racist,
Stereotypical.
homophobic, anti-female, like all these kind of
Oh
things.
my God, misogyny jokes are so boring.
What about Frankie Boyle, for example? Frankie Boyle is a very famous and popular comedian in Scotland.
I'm
Broadcasting
not into
within this
cancel
country.
culture. That I get that. Like,
But
people.
what you are saying is massively supporting cancel culture. It is saying that some comedy is allowed, some jokes are acceptable, and if you don't do them, then we're done listening to that, and it's
Yeah,
time for you to
sometimes
stop.
he should be cancelled, but I'm not into it as in a blanket. Like, if he has an audience, he has an audience. But I am allowed to push back against
Sure.
it. That's just how it
I
works.
went to-
and if you want to
do
push
like-
back against it, then
I
fine.
do like Frankie Boyle, and I like
Joke back at him.
I like how creative his jokes are. I can admire his skill in that he's very economical with words, but I do think that a middle-class white guy joking about people of colour it's jarring for me. Like, I just don't
There's a
think...
power imbalance there. That's the
Yeah,
thing.
it's-
And it's that thing, you should always punch upwards, not downwards.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's the hierarchy? What's the perfect hierarchy of race and class where people can punch upwards and downwards?
I think it's
where
just-
do I
I think
lie?
it's
Where
just
would you lie? Where do Jews lie?
It's just having the
everybody
good
should
sense to sort of be aware of the complexity of these discussions
And know
and
your
who might
audience
take.
as well.
I think people should have the good sense to take a joke and have a laugh. That's what I think. And I think
But why
this
so
obsession.
much at other people's expense?
Yeah.
Often taking a piss out of someone's pretty funny. It's a national institution.
So why
in
is
the UK
it
to take
funny
the
that
piss.
I'm brown?
When I was, it's not funny that you're brown.
No, but why is that a very common thing that middle-class white men love to pick on?
You'll have to ask them, and I'm sure you challenge them indirectly, or directly, or to their person. It's not something I'd ever joke about, but
Why would you not joke about it?
because it's not of my taste. My taste in comedy is limited mainly to people like Mickey Flanagan because they can take the piss out of me. It's fun to punch up, but there are some comedians who I think are deeply offensive and entertaining. I went to a comedy show in East London called Comedy Unleashed, which is meant to be, no holds barred, actually bringing comedy back to being a little less sensitive, a little bit more, a little less identitarian, a bit more about the actual humour. I listened to some great comics, which if I'd heard it in another set of circumstances, I would have panicked if I'd laughed at that, because I would have been like, people are looking at me, laughing at this offensive joke.
It's such a shame that you can't laugh out loud while people are being racist. Oh no!
Well, I mean, but comedy is it's a separate kind of atmosphere to what you'd expect from normal life. No one goes into a comedy set thinking this is all true. Everything the person says is what they believe. I agree with the idea that people generally should not.
You love playing devil's advocate.
I take the piss out of people for their identity. But
the devil does not need any help.
But I mean, come on, we should not try and limit comedy.
The thing
to
is,
the extent
I
that people
can
are
see
worrying
where
about
you're
what
coming
it's
from.
Right. Well,
I
it's
can
nice
see.
to hear that.
Look, I can see where you're coming from, and I can see how you got
So
there.
what you're saying is
but
keep the racist jokes, but ban porn. Got you.
but as a person
never pro
who
banning porn. I just think it should be
is
limited.
an easy target, I don't understand why it's funny.
For the reasons you just mentioned, I've always found that comedy is a powerful tool to change things. And whenever someone with too much power takes control, the first thing they try and get rid of is laughter and comedy and people who take the piss. Which is why it's funny to me now to think that the people who are now trying to limit comedy in some respect or change how open it can be are the people who typically haven't been in
It's
positions
like
of power.
Kevin Hart, for instance, made that really terrible joke about if his son was gay, he'd like beat him up or something. I don't remember about
Like,
playing
that's
with a
not even-
dollhouse.
that's just
It's not even
lazy.
funny, but it's incredibly homophobic, and it's just really sad. But there's an audience for that.
I mean, I don't think you should be able to police people's speech and things like that. But personally, I wouldn't spend my money on him because of that joke. Like, I just wouldn't.
Well, you're lucky you live in a
know,
free world and you can.
Of course,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
great.
and
We are aware.
Yes,
We are aware of how we can spend our
thanks
money.
for that.
But then what's the problem? Why should we have this discussion about what comedy is and isn't acceptable?
Because we have a
I'm
duty
just
of
giving
care
my
to each
opinion. Like,
other.
all
I
I'm
know.
I'm not saying that anyone should stop or start telling jokes, whatever they're doing, but I just think
This is an industry
for
that
me,
purposely
that
kept
it can be
minorities
used
out
for
as
good,
well.
or it can be used to further entrench racism and things like that. And I think you really need to think about what is my intention with this joke and what is the context. I do think that the lived experience it's not essential, but it can definitely enhance the comedy and make it better.
So I just really hate this phrase "lived experience." It really annoys me. What's an unlived experience?
Well,
Just call it experience.
like you couldn't.
It's just
It's
the
fine.
thing
You can't.
is,
Pisses me off.
You're not a.
you're not
American.
a
That was
target, and
totally
you're
true.
not a person who.
But that's it's not unlived. It's not about having a
Do you realise you have
fucking
more
dead
power than
experience.
me,
It's
just
about
systematically?
yeah.
No, it's
Just
about
by existing, you have more power than me.
No, I mean I'm sure.
See, that's the thing I don't understand is how you don't know that as a white male with like a really nice accent. It's
Thank
like
you very much.
how you
Terribly,
can't
it's
understand
terribly kind of you.
that you just systematically have more power than
I'm
me.
sure I'm privileged in many ways, more ways than I'm able to list. I'm sure.
I'm privileged too in many
Absolutely.
ways too, but
But-
one of them
but-
is not in the way society treats the way that the different that we're treated. And I can stipulate this because my boyfriend is very white, and before I knew
Not
of
just
course
white, very
race.
white.
Oh, he is. He's so cute. And the thing is, before racism was a part of my life, right? It wasn't until we started dating and we were in similar industries that I realised just how different people speak to us. He walks in a room and people automatically like, oh, is he important? Should I talk to him? And he'll
He's wearing
lead with
glasses.
a deal.
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, he looks, he's also very smart. He's nice. And then I walk into a room and often people think I'm the help. If racism and misogyny was just not so prevalent, I could just focus on my work. I could just write comedy and no one would ever ask me about my race. But they do. I have a sitcom coming out, but people just want to know how I feel about ISIS. What the fuck? But this is my experience, and I understand that you may feel the need to go on the defensive, or you feel
Because you're constantly
challenged.
attacking the identity to which you think I, so naturally belong to, or I necessarily must prescribe to everything that you associate with. Just
I
being a
definitely
white
don't
bloke.
associate with
A lot-
that.
a lot
But if
of-
you're playing devil's
just
advocate,
recognising it, I think,
it's-
is much as anything.
I recognise that people treat people differently based on their backgrounds. I'm not going to say that that's not the case. But what I think is a problem is that you have this hierarchy of identities where that person is of a certain class. They'll have a better life experience because of the colour of their skin. It's not necessarily. It doesn't work out that way all the time. The least represented group in universities right now are white working class blokes.
Oh, I knew you were going to say
well,
that.
it's true. Does that now mean that men are power imbalance there you have to attack? I mean, would you
I
come?
feel
Would
like
you,
But
would you,
are you worried about the
working
working
class
class element
men
of that?
should
So
have
that's a different.
class
why
above
are-
all, but
White men aren't underrepresented in university campuses.
But white
There's
working
a
class are.
difference there.
We
Again, there's
have
another
a-
dynamic
This
here
just
that
came
we
right
have.
off the comedy thing.
Oh shit, yeah.
So I feel sorry for them in the sense that I pity them, and it's just like a strange existence, and I just think it's quite pathetic. But how did we even get to something that's called incels, and why are they so angry? And why do they hate women so much? Because they have a mother, I hope, and like friends and things.
But maybe no dad.
Maybe no dad, yeah. It's just so...
I just don't feel
The rate of
sorry for
people
them.
without dads
It's
not
just-
becoming incels, I think,
Yes.
is probably
Always drawing these connections.
it's quite the link to fucking.
I just don't. I don't feel sorry for them at all.
No.
I think they join this kind of thing where they're maybe looking for some hope or whatever, but it's completely misguided. And I think that it's to feel sorry for them enables that, and it doesn't allow them the opportunity to take ownership for their own behaviour.
Exactly.
It's very self-seeking. It's very egotistical. It's all about them.
Just about dehumanising women.
Exactly, and it's all about what they're getting, their gratification, because they don't know how to
They
speak to
think
a
they're
woman.
owed something, which I find very interesting. Like they're so entitled to women's bodies and women's attention.
And you know, there's no need for anyone to be an incel because there are, like, escorting's legal. They could just go into their pocket,
then
pay a
sex
professional
workers are
if
people
it's
they look
really
down
that
on.
important to them.
And
There's
but-
that service exists.
Incels aren't looking for escorts. They're looking for the greatest thing that all human beings can find, which is deep and meaningful interpersonal
no, they're
relationships.
not.
Yes, they are.
No, they're
Yes,
not.
They may not realise it. They may
Involuntary
not.
celibate is all about sex.
It's about sex, but it's also about
We talk
connection
about
with
how
a human being.
ridiculous involuntary is in that whole thing as well. Like the term itself.
Like it's done to them. It's
Yeah.
not
Nothing
done
is done
to
to
them.
them.
Nothing
They're
is
martyrs
done
of-
to you.
themselves.
Yeah.
You're in control of you, and that's all you're in control of, nothing else. So, you know, if you are not meeting the right people and you're not connecting with people, you need to look at what you need to change within yourself.
Sure.
No one else.
And I entirely agree with it, but you can still feel
But
sorry for them. They're missing out on
I
the best
don't.
thing that humans can have, which is
But they're doing it
But they're
for
not though.
themselves.
They are missing out
They're
on it.
putting up a
what
block
are they-
because
I
they're
know,
making it about
but that
sex.
And
doesn't
also,
change the
they
fact they're
don't
missing
have. What I find fascinating is they expect women to be the complete package, right? And they never think about what they're bringing to the table.
Exactly,
They're
that is
so
my
happy being like
point.
basic bitches, and then like a woman has to be like gorgeous like you and like so smart. Like you're smart too, but like you know what I mean. Like you just
Yeah,
have
and
to
then
be
you've got this,
everything.
like-
And if the woman's like chubby like me, it's like oh, I wouldn't even like dare to like interact with that wobbly human, right?
Yeah, and then you've got this little sweaty slug expecting to put his dick in you. Like, it's not going to happen.
And it's just, the entitlement is so bizarre. And I still, the way that they come out of it, I find fascinating. It's like racists who then fall in love with a black woman and be like, I'm not racist anymore. And it's like, well, what do you want, a fucking cookie? Like,
And all that misogyny then leads on to things like conversations about stealthing and
That's
it's a power thing,
terrifying.
it's a control thing
it's
for
100%
them.
a control thing.
And I just completely do not agree with
And the
it.
thing
It's-
is, they
it's manipulative.
online, they often target women.
Sex is so everywhere and ubiquitous in our society.
Yeah,
you
but
have the opposite.
consent,
People are
like,
highly
people need to
regarded.
consent to what's
I'm
happening.
not justifying incels. I'm just saying. Let me clarify very clearly.
Devil's advocate for incels.
I know, Charlotte, you've done it now. You've justified it.
Everyone loves a contrarian, right?
You like
But I think
pick-up artist,
I think it's like an
1882.
Edinburgh Uni tutorial.
Look at his YouTube
I
for
think
it.
it's just definitely tougher being an incel nowadays than maybe it was
But they do it to
Back in the good
themselves.
old
back in the good days when incels just took
I
the
feel
L.
sorry for them that they have not evolved
when they-
enough to take responsibility for their own actions.
it's useful.
It's
Yes.
a sad existence.
I think it's useful that you use the word evolve because a lot of it comes down to kind of evolutionary, differences between men and women. Women are prizes in the kind of sexual sphere and looking for a partner. Men are dispensable in a way. Yeah, anyone can find a male partner,
don't
but
know,
women
because I
are much
feel-
more precious in the kind of in the sexual sphere. And that's always been the case.
Is that
I'm not sure if that's true because, like,
I think that's a cop out.
Yeah,
like
and
I really
also,
do. I think
men are so picky that like they often come across great women and are just like, oh, but I could probably do better. And that's also like Tinder and things do definitely do that. And like South Asian culture, men like just give the women away.
And if women were such prizes, then guys wouldn't cheat. Like they'd be just happy with what they've got. But you know, it's rife. So no, I don't agree with that.
No, they do it to themselves, and it's
they certainly do. But I think I can understand why it's difficult, and I feel sorry for them in the sense that they are just missing out on something great. Man,
okay, so what about
I feel sorry for them.
Women who can't get laid because they're like not conventionally attractive, they might not have the confidence, they might be riddled with anxiety, they might also just have bad personalities, right? They might also just be a female incel.
Might be a Nazi, a horrible person.
Exactly.
Yeah,
but the thing is, like, we feel sorry for men because, oh, women aren't giving them attention. I just don't understand why men are, like, they're allowed to be incels and then women are just told, well, you're ugly, so deal with
generally
it.
speaking, when it comes to women, we just find you attractive more readily.
And not all guys
already
that
find
don't
you attractive. It's just kind of like
that aren't able to connect turn into incels.
Yeah.
They don't not all identify as that. It just seems to be one group of very entitled men, and it's, you know, there's people that can't go into a club, like people who are maybe wheelchair bound or they've got other, like maybe mental health issues, anxiety and things, that can't just walk into a bar and talk to someone and pick up a girl and go home. And you know, these, not all of them turn into incels. So it's an attitude
They're,
thing.
like,
It's
more
an
limited in
entitlement
that
thing.
way.
So
and also it's the thing that they could have interactions with women, but they have to be the right women for them because they always want like a 10 because I find it fascinating that they want a 10 and they're just not doing
We're just with no effort whatsoever.
It's, again, entitlement. I'll just keep saying it, but it is.
It was, interesting, I think.
Charlie needs to watch more porn and tell less racist jokes.
definitely very challenging and quite lonely on some points.
Some curious opinions, but that's what makes a good conversation, I guess.